morning, everyone. Welcome to the Energy Realities podcast. I'm Dr. Tammy Nemeth. I'm the host today, and we have the TriStar panel. Today, we've got myself, Dr. Tammy Nemeth, and we've got Mr. David Blackman, who's in Texas. Hey, David, how you doing?
Just wonderful. It's a beautiful day in Texas. Had my birthday on Saturday and ready and raring to go here.
Congratulations. Did you have a really big birthday cake that started on fire when the candles were lit?
No, no, we had a slice of tres leches cake. We were at a Mexican restaurant for dinner, and that was great.
Wow, that's fantastic. Sounds good. We also have today Mr. Stu Turley, the most amazing guy out there in the energy space, Mr. Energy Newsbeat. Hey,
All
Stu,
right.
how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
Yay! And it's not too early, right?
Do what now?
And it's not too early.
Oh yeah, this 9 o'clock is. I've been up since 5 working on other stories, and it's kind of funny when you publish a story and you can see who's reading it within 15 minutes. It's amazing.
Yeah, that is pretty incredible. Well, today we are going to be talking about a whole kinds of different things. It's a roundtable. We love roundtables because there's so much happening in the energy space, and I think there's at least 7 things that we're going to talk about today. And I think number one, the elephant in the room, is the deal with Venezuela. So, David, let's start with you talking about this major deal that was announced with Venezuela. Do you think this is actually going to pan out? Is there some instability there that could scuttle things a year or two from now? What's your take?
Well, I mean, anything you do these days is anything Donald Trump does. Is automatically subject to being trashed next time we elect a Democratic president in the United States. But this is a contractual relationship um, that involves a 100-year lease related to 17 different oil fields, some in the Orinoco Basin and others in other parts of the country. Um, Supposedly, at least according to Venezuela's own estimates, have $65 billion in proven reserves, which is believable. These are some of the prime oil fields onshore in that country, and going to partner with a private company led by a controversial figure there in Venezuela, who is of course a friend of the president, Delcy Rodriguez, and we'll see how operationally. I think the big question to me is how competent is this company going to be in developing these oil fields, and will it take on partners from go into partnership with some of the bigger companies, the American companies that are already in the country or looking to get into the country. Chevron is supposedly going to announce a deal this week to significantly expand its own holdings there in Venezuela. Halliburton is apparently going to announce a deal to begin oil field operations support in the country or expand its presence there. And so, Hunt Oil Company's in there, Repsol's in there. There's several very sizable companies already in, and others looking, evaluating options for getting in. And, my belief is this Venezuelan company, the private company that's being set up to operate these fields, is going to probably go into partnership, do joint ventures with other companies with a lot more expertise and ability to fully develop them as time goes on. But, it's a valid lease agreement. I got into a back and forth with one of these media, every time something big happens and you're on X, we have about 10,000 experts who self-appoint themselves as new experts in oil and gas and start arguing with you about every little thing. And this guy, pointed to a provision in Venezuela's constitution, I think Article 2 talks about the land holdings and mineral holdings belong to the government. They are not transferable to anyone else. And it's like he's saying, well, this is illegal. It's unconstitutional under Venezuelan law. And I'm like, what do you think Delcy Rodriguez and her husband are going to contract, get an oil rig at least and go drill these wells themselves? Venezuela has always done leases with international companies to
Yeah.
develop their resources, perfectly legal. It's a binding contract. It's no different than the United States doing its auctions in its offshore and onshore federal lands, leasing to private companies to develop the resources beneath them and taking a royalty interest. This one's got apparently a 30% royalty provision going back to the government, which is awfully generous in the United States. It's either 12.5% or 16 2/3%, depending on where you are. So that's a very generous royalty deal for the government. It's going to create a lot of revenue, assuming the resources are developed. But we just had the announcement on Friday. There's 1,000 details that are going to have to get worked out. Right now, it's a promising arrangement that is going to, if it does get developed properly, mean a lot of new oil resources, heavy oil resources coming into U.S. refineries that potentially, could go into competition with the heavy oil coming down from Canada. And there's all these dynamics now with
Yeah.
the collapse in trade relationships with Canada, all the threats going back and forth from Doug Ford and Mark Carney and Donald Trump, and it just is crazy back and forth. And so the politics of all that could be fascinating, and just another reason for me to wake up in the morning and start writing. So I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to it.
There's so much to write about, and
Yeah.
I'm glad you laid out a lot of that detail about the agreement. And I'm wondering what either of you think about the historical. It usually has to be the state oil company that has a share, especially since the mid 1970s when they initiated that process of nationalization.
Yeah.
And so I haven't really looked in great detail on the agreement. So, what is the relationship of this new company they're setting up and the state oil
And
company?
PDVSA. Yeah.
Hmm.
There's no mention of PDVSA in any of it. So that's fascinating to me. Stu, you go ahead. Sorry.
SLB is just unleashed 15 rigs to start working on this out of cold storage. So when you bring a rig out of cold storage, A, it means that something's coming. B, Chevron has hit about 1.1 million barrels per day because of their work. They're wanting to bump another 3 million on top of this, or ballpark, whatever the number is. So you take a look at this, the dynamic of this coming at this particular moment in time is very critical. And David, your comments are all fantastic. And I don't mean to be nice this morning. It is Monday morning and I need to be mean, but I'll tell you, old Doug Ford needs to absolutely put a muzzle on his mouth. He is absolutely not a very smart man. You sit back and take a look at this. He is approaching Ed Miliband status of being a Muppet. And I'm sorry for saying that one as well, too. But when you sit back and look at New York City, I almost want to do a you remember that Pace Picani ad? New York City. If we're from Texas and we say New York City, New York City put $6 billion into a hydro line, and lines to other countries don't work. They've been getting about 30 minutes to an hour a day out of that because of the water shortage in Canada. And you spend $6 billion for we got power for 30 minutes. Woohoo! That is energy dominance negative is what that is. So you take a look at Ford, you've got line 5 problem that you shared that coming around, but we send up through the pipelines refined products to Ottawa. So old Doug's over there doing the elbows up again kind of a thing, which I think is absolutely.
What is that? By the way, what is that elbows up thing?
It's a
It's
hockey
from
match.
it's a hockey metaphor.
Okay, all right. I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
Stu. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh no, it's a Gavin
When they throw
Newsom
the gloves
pretending to
down,
be
yeah.
a hockey player,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay. Anyway, Doug is really messing with the wrong deck here. What they need to do is plan 10 years out like Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has something. Let me bring to the stage this little item here, and that is what is going on around the world right now. And I think is part of this gigantic big picture is a change around the global choke points. And the
Yeah.
change around the global choke points is really a huge thing. And one of the biggest things that I found while I'm writing all this stuff right now is all in economic cost in a price per barrel. And let's go ahead and take a look. This is also a great the Nemeth Report Substack. I want to talk about this article that you just put out in just a minute. And let's take a look at the all-in cost, full economic cost of major crudes around the world. This one up here is Saudi Arabia at $12. That's all in cost. I mean, actually, if you want to know the truth, it's closer to $3.
Yeah.
I mean, so you take a look at the all in cost. Let's come down here to Venezuela, $46. That's better than the Permian. Permian is, whereas Brazil is in here. You take a look at all this kind of stuff. I'm verifying these numbers is why I haven't published this on my article yet. I'm sitting there kind of going, wait a minute. And we're over here at that number is, I got to zoom in there. So you take a look, the U.S. majors are looking outside of choke points and they're looking at all in cost. Venezuela, I think, is actually higher than that $46 number. So when President Trump thinks oil is going to get to $50, not anytime soon, unless 100% of the oil comes from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, Russia, Guyana, Brazil, and Argentina. They can't supply all of the oil. When you start looking at $50 oil, those are the only ones that can do the break even number. So I'm still working on these numbers. So those are pre-release numbers that I'm working on, and the numbers don't math up.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point about the break even numbers, which tend to shift depending on inflation and um, the equipment costs and all of those different things. And I think the mentality is that if we put more oil on the market, it will lower the price and eventually it'll get to 50. But I don't see your numbers are right, Stu, in the sense that there's so many other factors that go into what is that break even point.
Right.
You have finance charges, you have all of these different things, insurance, and
Regulatory
whatnot,
overreach.
regulatory overreach, all of those different things that factor into it. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next 5 or 10 years. But I get that Trump is trying to have that narrative that if we bring all this supply online, it will lower the prices, things will get lower at the pump. How about building more refining capacity? That would probably help lower prices. How about get rid of a bunch of the taxes? That would be helpful.
Yeah, that would really help.
Especially in the blue states, but there's no way that the blue states are going to lower their taxes
No,
at the
they're all
pump.
running massive deficits. They can't.
They can't. And plus,
Yeah.
they want to persuade people not to drive their car. And the biggest cudgel they have is to increase the price so people can't afford to drive their car. So, yeah, that's.
Yep.
Jeff has a great point. I love Jeff. The reserves that are identified prior to nationalization are largely in still places. The production volumes have been paltry. The systems have been eviscerated in Venezuela. It's not bring your own beer, as I thought about in college, BYOB. It's BYOP, bring your own power. So you have to be running your own power stations because their grid is totally wiped out. But I want to bring up this really big point. China was buying, I believe it was 70%, 80% of Venezuela's oil at a deep discount. Then they
Yeah.
were turning around and they were selling their products back to Venezuela at, wait for it, I'm going to pull a Joe Biden, retail. And they were bumping up the prices over here. And so all of a sudden, that real cost to Venezuela, or the money they were getting back and realized, was $10 a barrel. All of a sudden, you start looking back at how they're now restructuring this. The real winner is Venezuela out of this deal.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you think about what Maduro wanted for his country, it certainly wasn't to have all this money for the people. And you have to wonder what his motivations were for running the country the way he did and taking that deal and whatever else, right? And
Yeah.
so now there's an opportunity for Venezuela to grow and have a stronger economy like it did back in the 1950s, 1960s. So there's an opportunity there, but who knows what will happen? Like I think I commented on one of your LinkedIn posts, David, the historical reality of Venezuela, where they've had these military coups. I think
Yep.
5 or 6 of them just in the 20th century. And, 4 of them ended up in military juntas, maybe 5. And sometimes that's been positive, and sometimes, as we had with Chavez, it was very negative. So it depends. And Venezuela has this history of being a bit of a roller coaster when it comes to these kinds of things. It is the father of OPEC. So it'll be interesting to see if they stay with OPEC. Do they leave the way others have? So does OPEC just fall apart?
Yeah. A couple
Because
of,
the
oh, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Nope. Well, I think they're fixing to get out of OPEC. I mean, I think that will happen within a pretty short period of time. I think that's the U.S. plan. The other thing about this is, I think I believe, and it's just me speculating, okay, nothing else on it, but I think if the United States is going to have an ownership interest in 65 billion barrels of proven reserves, which means there's well over 100 billion barrels down there, you're probably going to end up, I think it's going to be a requirement by the U.S. government to have a security presence in that country to protect those assets. Because this is a major national asset now, even though you don't own, it's a lease. It's not being just transferred to you. You got to perform and operate and drill the wells, but it's a major national asset. And the United States is going to insist on a security presence down there in the form of military personnel, which is going to act, in my view, as a major inhibitor to future military takeovers of the government. And so, whether that's right or wrong, and I'm not saying it's one or the other, I think it's going to be a thing. It's just going to be reality on the ground. And, so to me, that would at least enhance the prospects for some stability in government, whether people are fans of the current government or not. As long as it's cooperative with the United States government, it's probably going to remain in power. And that's just how it's always worked in the Western Hemisphere. If we elect a Democrat in 2028, then it's going to be really interesting to see what they do with this deal, because, it's got Trump's name attached to it. And, you've got candidates running for president who are swearing to blow up the ballroom he's building. Okay. If they get elected, crazy, insane things like that. So, it's none of it's written in stone right now. And there's a lot of things that have to be worked out, but at least as a deal, it seems legal and, promising at least to enhance the wealth in that country and also the energy security in both countries. So But that's all we can say about it for now. I think you can't know what the future is going to hold.
No,
Oh
all we
yes,
can,
Aslan.
yeah, that's a good point. Um, and then U.S. security presence in Saskatchewan.
Oh
I
God.
don't know,
Let's
Saskatchewan.
hope that things don't come to that.
Yeah,
That
Let
let's
would
me.
be
protect the wheat fields.
I just put out
yeah.
an article from one of my Russian authors. Will there be an OPEC for Venezuela to leave? Yeah, I believe that there will be. Um, there's already been communication on whether or not Venezuela is going to remain in OPEC. That's already been going on. And then will there be a North American Petroleum Producers Club of Americas type thing?
Or
Yes,
how
I
about a
think that there
Western
will be.
Hemispheric one?
That's what I mean, the whole shooting
Yeah,
match. And so I
north
think
and
that there
south.
is going to be one. And I still think this is bringing up Aslan is such a cool cat. This is bringing up a bigger thing. Did Putin sponsor? I'm going to probably just throw a real horseshoe in today's podcast because I still think trading blocks are changing around the world. I see the new trading blocks, and I've been talking about this for a long time. They're forming, and I'm seeing communications between the countries. You're going to see Russia, China, India, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and the United States, Japan in a major trading block, and you're going to not see the UK and the EU. So
Are
that
you
goes right on
saying
there.
America's going to join BRICS?
It's going to be a different thing than bricks. And I see bricks going away on the side. And I see as much gold as China, the US, and Russia are buying. I see a major change coming. And that's probably not for this podcast, but I think that there is enough in the works that Secretary Besson is doing the work of the Fed. The Fed is not working. And I
Yeah.
see that that is being ended.
Okay. Before we dive into that one, which we should probably do in a different episode,
I don't know
I
enough
just
about it to comment.
I would like to just kind of tie this into Canada because as you had mentioned, Doug Ford, who's the Premier of Ontario, the Ontario has a lot of minerals and resources and whatnot, but it's also the manufacturing kind of heartland of Canada, and it's based mostly around automobiles. And back in the 1960s, we negotiated an agreement with the United States called the Auto Pact that created branch plants of American auto manufacturers in Canada and allow Canada to participate in the northern market, the North American market, so that it becomes integrated. And there was a side deal in the original free trade agreement of 1988, and this was carried over into the CUSMA. And what's interesting is that um, he's upset because they were trying to push this EV thing in Canada. Lots of money was sunk into it, both provincial and federal, and nothing happened. The money was sunk in, it disappeared, the projects ended. I think maybe one or two actually were successful, but out of like the 50 some billion that they spent, probably 1 billion was recoverable or whatever. So it's an insane thing.
Sounds like
And
the U.S. aid budget. Anyway, go
right,
ahead.
right. So, he's hurting because of this, the whole try to attempt to shift to the EVs. Trump is putting tariffs on. Now they're pushing to create Chinese EVs in Canada, which will never get into the American market. So, he's feeling this stress. But instead of saying to Mark Carney, negotiate something good, he supports this whole kabuki theater of walking away and everything because I don't think Mark Carney legitimately wants a deal. I think he wants it to collapse. I think he wants Canadians to have a justification for his push to make us part of the EU, whether it's an associate member or whatever. And I'm going to have an article coming out in the next day or so about the implications of the Iceland vote yesterday, where they said, no, no thanks, EU. We're not even going to reopen consideration of joining you guys. So this has repercussions. The Venezuela deal has repercussions for Canada. Like you mentioned, David, a lot of the heavy oil from Canada has been feeding down into the refineries of the Gulf Coast because of when Venezuela went all bat crazy and production dropped or whatever. And
Yeah.
that filled the gap, right? And but this also plays into Carney's hand because if you look at all of these different climate finance rules and everything else that will discriminate against energy companies, he doesn't want the oil sands to be expanded. He just wants to phase them out. So, but as long as there's an American market that's booming to ship to, there's an excuse to expand production. But if you cut off those pipelines, and you really slow down how much gets exported out to Asia, then there's no need to expand oil sands
Right.
production. And it gets shrunk, it gets phased out, and this plays into his larger net zero goals.
We're seeing the death of Canada as we know it in real time. And Canada, Aslan again,
Yeah.
Canada will be part of the CCP, not EU. I believe in my heart that I'm watching Doug Ford and Mark Carney work with the United States Socialists of America and the Democrat Party to try to influence the midterms.
I
And
know.
um,
It's
and
crazy.
and it's going to be the destruction of Canada as we know it right now. And I think that Alberta, our great snow Texans, stand a chance on their own. If I really think that they need to claim independence, invite the United States to have one or two military bases, charge us a lot of money to have military bases, and then raise the rates so that they pay a premium for that oil field sands. Let's rock.
Yeah, I don't know. I the Alberta referendum is just to say whether or not they're going to have another referendum on a real question, and it requires all of this consultation with
Yeah.
Indigenous people, apparently, which Quebec never had to do, but apparently Alberta has to do it, and just there's a lot of complications there. It would
Can
be
I
better if Alberta would to say, "Come on, Saskatchewan, come on, Northern British Columbia, let's create a block." That would make more sense. But for Alberta to try and do this on their own, I think it's problematic, and I don't know.
can can I ask something about tariffs? And this is kind of mind-boggling to me that if a product is made, we've got metal going back and forth between the United States. It gets tariffed on the way here. We roll the aluminum here. It gets shipped back and it's tariffed again going back to Canada. And then it's tariffed between provinces in Canada. So I'm sitting there looking at the math on this, and no wonder China's kicking all of our butts.
Yeah.
This is absolutely tariff, tariff, ship, tariff, ship, tariff, 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 ship, tariff, ship. And then you get it over here. No wonder a Ford truck is now $65,000 that they can remotely shut down and nobody will buy. This is nuts.
Well, that's a really good point. One of the things about the Kuzma supposedly was that all of those products going back and forth because you get it in a raw state, then you ship it, it gets processed, it gets shipped back, and it goes back and forth several times. It was supposed to be no tariffs on all of those different movements. But with this new structure, I don't know, seems to be,
Canada's tariffing themselves.
well, yeah, we have the most terrible interprovincial trade barriers you've ever heard of. Like,
That,
it's
yeah.
insane. But every time a province tries to do something, the courts rule they can't. So I don't know. It's a
You've
problem.
ruined an Oklahoma State graduate's way to calculate because I lost track because I lost my hand count of how many times a single product was counted. I'm sitting there counting on my fingers and I'm like, there's like 14 different tariffs on a single product. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, and then what's interesting is that, the China ships raw steel or raw aluminum or whatever into Canada at a discounted price. which then Canada rolls into its own production lines and sends to the United States. But apparently, it's so ubiquitous and so messy. The Canadian manufacturers said they cannot differentiate between what is Chinese and what isn't, which I call BS.
I
They
talked to
know
some folks that
precisely. Come
can.
on.
I talked to some
Exactly.
folks that
Yeah, they
can. There
have
are
to
about
know.
80 Canadian rigs working in the United States. They are breaking because of cheap Chinese. I'm writing a story. I'm trying to get details. It's tough, but they're finding a very high breakage point in the field. This is a
Mm,
safety issue.
yeah.
So when President Trump says Canadians are flooding the US market, they are flooding the US market with cheap timber from
Mm,
China. I did not have this one on my bingo card either.
Cheap timber from China.
Yes.
Wow.
We'll figure that out. The lumber market is now infected with Chinese market influx. So is the steel. So is everything else. So Mark Carney, in his trip to China, signed a deal that he will not share with the Canadian people. This is traitorous behavior, in my opinion. And he has 90% of his holdings in the United States.
Yeah, I know. So one of the interesting things about this whole trade issue is that there's three by-elections today in Canada.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's very coincidental that he was dropping in the polls. People were saying he wasn't doing enough to push back against the United States. Then suddenly, pulls makes these ridiculous claims about what was going on with the trade negotiations, claims that, we're at war with America and all that kind of stuff. I mean, what's the point of having that kind of rhetoric, really? And then at the same time, Mark Carney's going to have this huge investment conference promoted by the federal government in September in a couple of weeks. And the head of Invest Canada resigned suddenly on the weekend. Then she's supposed to be coordinating the logistics of this conference.
Wow.
Then within 24 hours, all over X, all these liberal supporters putting out their tweets about how amazing this investment conference is going to be, all these institutional investors, America's going to be losing out, Canada's the place to go for investment. And I'm thinking, investment in what? Any kind of project takes at least 10 years, 7 if you're lucky, to even put a shovel in the ground. So what exactly are they going to be investing in?
Yeah.
I don't know. They haven't
That
fixed that
makes it
problem.
hard. The delays, the bureaucracy in Canada, the EU, and the United States. I mean, it just makes everything so unnecessarily hard, but it protects the turf of these bureaucrats and expands their influence. And it's a pernicious thing throughout the Western world that we just can't get away from. It's a point I made about the Venezuela deal. There were people all over X talking about, oh, we're just going to drop the price of oil to $60 next week, and stuff like that. No, man, this is 7 to 10 year projects, under ideal circumstances.
Yeah.
In the greenfield areas, the brownfield areas, you can probably enhance production fairly quickly by refurbishing wells and replacing dilapidated equipment. And we've already done a lot of that in Venezuela this year, but these greenfield leases, that's a major capital investment. It's time consuming, and it's the infrastructure's not there.
Yeah.
On top of everything else, they're in some of it's in remote areas, very very primitive road infrastructure and things like that. So this is a long-term play, and it has to be in a lot of ways. It's not going to happen fast. So, but it's same thing all over the West, and it makes us less competitive all the time with China. And it's our own fault because we all decided as countries back in the 70s and 80s, we're going to get out of mining, get out of oil and gas. Jimmy Carter famously saying we're going to run out of oil by 2000, and all that nonsense that was happening during that period of time. And wasn't just in the US, it was all over the
It's all over
Western
the
world.
world.
Yeah. And we just ceded all that hard, heavy industry to Chinese influence. And now we sit here in 2026 and wonder why they control all the supply chains. Well, they control all supply chains because we wanted them to through, as a
Yeah.
project of globalism. And so here we sit in terrible situations in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and a big part of it is the whole net zero push, where because of emissions and because of environmental regulations, which were overly stringent, I think, in a lot of different ways, that didn't need to be, and it usually relating to emissions profiles and whatnot. Um, that's a major cause for the deindustrialization that
Oh,
we're
yeah.
seeing in Europe for sure, and a big chunk of it for the United States and Canada as well. So, yay, net zero!
Yay, net
One more way
zero.
to
Regional net zero. We get to say we're at net zero here in Canada and Great Britain and Belgium. And meanwhile, China's just belching it all out with coal-fired plants and industrial installations and building all our solar panels and windmills for us. It's incredible. So
Yeah.
stupid.
So I kind of want to pivot a little bit. It's related. It's about Trump trolling Canada with changing Lake Ontario to Lake of America or Lake America or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because George Friedman of Geopolitical Futures did the Q&A where subscribers can ask him questions. And there was a whole bunch about Canada that the Canadians are feeling very combative and emotional about this thing. And he said, look, you have to remember that in trade negotiations, it's about putting your opponent off balance. And if the minute you give into emotionalism, you're done. You'll make stupid decisions, and this isn't helpful if you're trying to get a good deal.
Yeah.
And I don't know how emotional our trade negotiators are, but the public certainly is, where they have, they're just like flipping out about the changing of the name. And one of the interesting things that have been pointed out across social media and amongst Canadian discussion circles is that why why are you mad about Donald Trump changing the name of something when cities and provinces all over the country have changed names to things that are unpronounceable
Yeah.
in order to accommodate Indigenous considerations? Like there's streets in Winnipeg, in Vancouver, in Edmonton, or whatever, that it's like if I was in an emergency and I said to the police, I'm on the corner of a street, and they'd be like, what's the corner? I'd be like, I don't know. I can't pronounce it, because it doesn't even use the Latin language like alphabet. It uses some weirdo alphabet. So it's like, why are you mad about him changing the name of the lake when you're doing it every day in the country?
Yeah.
So I thought that was funny.
My favorite thing was we're going to rename Canada geese Donald Ducks, which was pretty good. But
That was a
you
good
know,
one.
but there's all kinds of things that different countries give different names to. The river that separates Texas and Mexico, we call it the Rio Grande in Texas, but in Mexico they call it the Rio Bravo. It's the same river, different
Hmm.
name.
Yeah.
And so it's not unprecedented. It's kind of silly, but I do agree that it's a tactic President Trump uses in negotiations, and it's one reason why he's so effective in doing it, throwing out all these things to keep the counterparty off balance and
Yeah.
making bad decisions, and it works for him in a lot of ways. I don't think Lake America is probably going to stick for the long term, but I did notice Google Maps made the change
Yeah.
But
when the
Apple
government
didn't.
did. So
Yeah. Apple
what's that,
didn't.
Stu?
Apple didn't.
Apple didn't. Okay, well, Trump will have
Cook.
the CEO. Yeah, what's his first name? I can't remember his first name.
Tim.
Tim. Yeah,
Tim
Tim
Cook.
Apple. He calls him Tim Apple. He'll have Tim Apple up at the White House pretty soon and chastise him for that.
So coincidentally, or not, while all this stuff was happening, there was an accident last week on Enbridge's Line 5 rerouting around one of the native tribes in Wisconsin. And somehow a parked semi truck rolled down and hit an open pit where they were working on moving the pipeline. And this other pipeline had been carrying natural gas propane and natural gas liquids, and it had this big plume of gas or whatever,
Yeah.
and they've been cleaning it up and whatnot. But at the same time that Canada's trying to um, create a new pipeline that will run from Alberta all the way to Ontario without going through the United States, this incident happens, and the native tribe just happened to have a drone ready to go um, within not too long of the incident happening, and took these drone pictures or whatever that have been circulating in different newspapers and online and whatever. So I just find that very fascinating that just when all this other stuff is happening,
Yeah.
this incident happens.
It's really kind of amazing. As a former crisis response specialist in another life, I was really impressed by Enbridge's fast response to that. You know, I mean, it was very quick and nobody was hurt, and it was, you know, really good performance by the company. On line 5, we also had this decision by the Supreme Court in Michigan last week,
Yeah,
um, delaying the reissuance of Enbridge's license for line 5,
yeah,
which, you know, by a bunch of left-wing judges who took a lot of money from Jane Fonda's super PAC just before they issued that decision. You know, kind of suspicious. But it's, you know, you look at it in the context of the trade negotiations between the U.S. and Canada. It's Canada's big weakness. Enbridge carries refined products and crude oil into Ontario, right, on a pipeline from that takes its feedstock from a couple of refineries in Wisconsin that bring what, oil sands crude into the United States on a different line. They refine it at those refineries. Enbridge picks it up, moves it into Ontario, and so it's just illustrative of how dependent Ontario and the whole eastern part of Canada, the big population areas, are heavily reliant on the United States for their energy security, and it really weakens Carney's position in those negotiations. You know, Doug Ford, you know, came out in big bombast last Tuesday and was holding a press conference and, you know, well, we're just going to stop exporting electricity into the United States because they do export a lot of hydropower electricity into the U.S. and that's,
1% of
you
the
know,
U.S. grid comes from Canada.
yeah,
yeah. But still, in significant areas.
but
To
it's an
those
empty threat.
impacted,
It's an empty threat because then, you know, you do that. Well, Trump just turns off the pipelines, or his pipelines shut down, and suddenly, you know, Canada's in a terrible situation. So it just, in someone, a reporter reminded him of that during that press conference. He's like, well, that's just crazy. Well, yeah, it is kind of crazy, but it's because you won't build your own pipelines. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah,
it's
there's a
just
lot of
interesting.
different reasons why that pipeline all across Canada hasn't been built. And
Yeah.
a lot of it comes down to who's going to pay for it. Or can you ensure that there's going to be enough buyers for the product to justify that pipeline? Because when
Yeah.
it goes down south, then that's what makes it economical. And right now I'm trying to imagine what it would take to get the environmental approvals to be blowing up parts of the Canadian Shield because it's solid rock. And unless you're going to have that oil pipeline run above ground in -30 conditions, which is kind of stupid,
Yeah. It wouldn't
um,
really work, probably.
it wouldn't really work. And so you'd have to be. They did it for the Trans Canada Pipeline, which is the large natural gas pipeline that connects Alberta to Ontario and Quebec. That they did that one all through Canada through the Canadian Shield, but that was in the 1950s.
Yeah.
And what it would take now to build that, I don't know. But Alberta and Ontario signed a memorandum of understanding about a month and a half ago, saying that they agree that they want to do this, but they need federal permission because it crosses different provincial boundaries. So good
Yeah.
luck. Good luck doing that. Maybe this will help.
the Alaska pipeline, much of it is above ground.
That's true. Yeah, so that it doesn't damage the permafrost.
No, in fact, they got moose and elk crossings in there. I actually sold a bunch of stuff up there in Alaska and loved all my trips up there. So
Beautiful place.
it is.
The
And all
caribou
the
have,
signs have been shot. Do not shoot the signs, and they're all been shot. You got to love Alaska.
The caribou population massively expanded in the first 5 to 10 years after Trans-Alaska opened up due to the warmth the pipeline provided them during the winter. And the caribou population, I can't remember, it was like expanded by 600% or something like that. So it's instead of being a disaster for the wildlife, it was a big boom for them.
Aslan brings up a great point. You know, New York, especially, got electricity to shut off due to windmills. But New York City spent $6 billion for this thing to happen, to have 30 minutes of power. Absolutely,
Yeah.
it
It's
displays
genius,
energy dependency at its finest.
sheer genius.
Okay, so I want to pivot a little bit after talking about Canada. Let's talk a little bit about Iran. So there's been rumors circulating. Stu, I'm going to point this one at you. Do you think America will attack Karg Island?
The jury's out on that. President Trump, somebody please get that phone away from that man, and let him think before he responds.
Uh, I've been saying that for 10 years, Stu. It's not ever
Oh
going to
my
happen.
goodness, he is entertainment at its finest. Here's my take on this. I actually have said the only way to end the IRGC's control over their country is to take control in the Venezuela style of that. Look what's happening with Venezuela.
Yeah.
We're seeing long-term contracts. We're seeing things play out. Look at Iraq. Iraq now has Exxon, Chevron, a couple other major countries. They have a pipeline going through Syria now. They have discussions. They have the pipeline extension with Turkey. They are now moving away, and they are now throwing out the Iran leadership that was controlling their country. So, no, there is a lot of things going on. Do I want boots on the ground? No. Do I see, and if I talk to some folks over there, the IRGC cannot pay the Iranian police departments now. There are major things going on. So Secretary Scott Bessent was one of the most evil financial men in the planet. I would never want to cross that man. Just want to say that publicly, that he should be left alone. And he is not a villain out of a Mike Myers skit going, I'm going to wipe you out. No, this man will wipe you out. He's more like a Batman evil kind of character that will wipe you out. So I see some things changing in Iran, and I don't think we will need boots on the ground. Kepler finally admitted that oil is sneaking out. By my Oklahoma State crayon math, we're now only short about 5 million barrels per day that is now short around the world. Now we're short a billion barrels of oil out of reserves ballpark. Again, I'm just throwing some numbers out there. Diesel is the major story of the day, and we are
Yeah.
going to see a gigantic impact to the Trump administration and the EU and the UK and Canada with the diesel shortage, because Russia is not sending out anything. They have had their refineries all hit. They are down 40, they're down 60% in their refining capacity. India is the refining swing trader right now.
Yeah.
You now have China buying oil again from Saudi Arabia. That has then shifted from Iran. They scooped
Yeah.
their biggest customer. So I see things changing very positively for everyone around the world.
Yeah, Aslan Pilot Car has a good point there. I talked about this a little bit with Joseph Fournier, that China is making diesel from coal, so it's deploying the coal gasification like what Germany did during World War II. So that's an interesting development as well. And I wonder about, will Europe wake up and build more refineries? Or will they stay dependent on other jurisdictions now that there's all this competition out there? I think they won't, just because it doesn't fit their Green Deal net zero
Right.
sort
I
of
mean, under the current
project.
leadership, right?
Yeah, there's no way.
They certainly won't because they're all WEF acolytes like Ursula von der Leyen and what's the dude's name in France? Anyway, yeah, but elections happen and
Macron's
things could
wife
change
or
in there.
Macron?
Macron.
Oh, sorry. Some things are just funny.
Anyway, I'm being sarcastic. But
I'm
yeah,
not.
elections need to happen and good
Mm.
outcomes need to happen for that to change because, these people are ideologues and they're ideologically committed to this net zero fantasy. And as we see constantly from these left wingers, they never admit they're wrong about anything. They always double down, triple down, quadruple down on the same mistakes, regardless of how bad it makes things for the people that they govern. And that's
Yeah,
just who they are.
yeah. Well, speaking of the EU, Irina had a really good piece this morning about the lack of filling of the natural gas reserves or whatever in Europe. And part of it is this sort of they've been holding back, hoping prices would go down. And so now they're in a situation where they're hoping it's going to be a mild winter, which I doubt it's going to be. You never know. But with the type of weather systems we've had over the past little while, it's more likely it's going to be a harsher winter than the last year or two. Um, so, what's your take on the EU once again not filling its gas reserves in a timely fashion?
Well, I mean, we've been concerned about that for several years running now, and they always find ways to, I mean, the oil industry, the energy space, it's pretty flexible and creative in avoiding major disasters, but they do seem to want to live on the edge with this every year, and eventually you're not going to have a warm winter like they've had, for the last several years, as you said. Eventually, you're going to have a harsh winter that's really going to create big problems, and I mean, I certainly don't hope anything terrible happens, but they're putting themselves in a high risk situation that there are ways to avoid, and they ought to be avoiding it.
Yeah. Stu, what do you think?
I don't know that I can voice my opinion publicly right now on this, and I'll just say that I think that the EU and the UK and Canada have followed the net zero methodology too far. Deindustrialization is now real. There is a correlation between green energy and the belief that it is cheaper. It is not cheaper. But let me throw this at you. Elon has just filed paperwork to build the largest solar factory to automate it. And if anybody can do it, he is about up there with Secretary Bessent being very creative. And if anybody can, Elon can't. Now, does solar belong on the grid at scale? I'm going to say no, not with current technology, not with the wind current technology, because on an asynchronous grid solution at 60 hertz or 50 hertz, they do not belong on the grid at scale without keeping other forms of asynchronous energy moving forward. So,
Yeah.
my answer is the leadership. I do not know them personally, but I do not believe that they believe in God. I don't believe that they are capable of praying, and they should be praying now for a warmer winter rather than going, we might have a warmer winter. You might not. Energy security starts at home, and they ain't got it.
Yeah.
So speaking of Elon Musk, my husband told me on the weekend that he was going to be building. It will cast its own gas turbine blades or something
Yep.
to cut at a foundry in Texas to cut the lead times, um, because the turbine manufacturers are so slow.
Well, they are.
So, yeah.
Let's
And,
see. Where did I write on that one?
did you
I
write
wrote.
about that, Stu?
I did. Let me find it. Game changer. Here we go. Launching new turbine blade factory. Here we go. And it is at SpaceX and Tesla are building a 100 gigawatt per year of solar production capacity, but it's also going to be on the blades because he can use them in his Raptor engines. And
Right.
whether or not he can build them for AI and who else can it be? It's going to be in Bastrop, Texas. I went through the filings and went through everything else. So that is on energynewsbeat.com or .co.
Yeah, that corridor from Austin to Bastrop is going to become a major manufacturing industrial corridor in Texas. 30 miles of what 20 years ago was empty country land. It's going to become a fully developed corridor very quickly.
Which is good. That's good that manufacturing is coming back
Yeah.
to the United States in the free state of Texas.
Yep. Who knows? Maybe if Elon makes enough of these solar panels for himself, he can actually run his Tesla factory partially on solar. It's run on natural gas right now and has been since it opened.
Yeah.
The
man's
solar
not
factory
stupid.
is called not Crystal Meth, but Crystal something, Crystal Palace. That was another article that I wrote the other day, and it's amazing on that factory that he's got going out. It's going to be fully automated. Now, here's the thing and the rub. There is less than 1% being recycled of solar panels in the United States right now.
Yeah.
We have a toxic problem.
Yeah.
This is not like a toxic sock syndrome. This is toxic problem with land and farm animals and everything else. Once a solar farm is put out on farmland, that land is ruined permanently.
Yeah.
Well, we
That is
just
true.
had this terrible example last week. We had these huge fires in Palo Pinto County, right outside of Fort Worth, and one of them burned the land underneath a big solar array and was melting, obviously, many of the solar panels. And I just can't imagine what kind of toxic chemicals are leaching into the soil right now. And I wonder who's going to be responsible for it. And I wonder if our state government is going to do a proper investigation and audit of all that.
And in New York, I don't know about the UK or Canada, but in New York, it is legal if you bury it 3 feet under, you're considered good. I consider that stupid.
Yeah, because it condemns the land permanently from farm use.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So for people who want to look more positively at the sort of innovations and developments that are happening in the world, but predominantly in the United States, I would like to recommend Matt Ridley's Rational Optimist Society. And on his Substack, he's got something called the Innovators League 30. And it goes through all of these really cool innovations and startups that are out there. They're actually making things that are truly innovative and really give us hope for the future, that manufacturing and ideas aren't dead yet in the United States. And unfortunately, I don't see very many Europeans, if any, on his list. But it's a really good Substack, just if you want to have a more positive view of what's happening in the world and the developments that are taking place. David, what's new with your Substack? You want to give a shout out to?
I've just been writing about the Venezuela thing the last 3 or 4 days. I'm going to try to focus on some other topics this week, but that consumed all of my limited brain capacity over the weekend.
Well, it was a big story, and there was a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. Oh, I did that Practical Energy Insights podcast, and that Jonathan Pillett is a industry veteran himself, much younger than I am, but he's got 20, I think, years in the industry, really smart guy, a lot of insights of his own. And I recommend everyone follow his podcast out on YouTube. It's really good, and a lot of interesting guests, not including me.
Excellent. Thank you. Stu, what's going on at Energy Newsbeat?
Oh, way a lot of fun. I just interviewed Jack Prandelli. He is the Merchant News Substack, and he is absolutely a hoot. He's in
Very
Switzerland, and we
guy.
had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I had that article on what happens if Canada shuts down the electricity to New York. You got to love having a good conversation around that. But actually have Doomberg coming back on, and the CEO of Jackery, because of all the rolling blackouts threatening around the world and everything else. So that one will be next week. But also, I want to bring up this article from the Nemeth Report Substack. Go to thenemethreport.substack.com. Happen to have you here. By the way, what do you think about Norway breaking ranks?
Yeah, so I just put that out today. I was thinking about what Norway's 3 big announcements last week. One, that the green battery, them being the green battery for Europe, is over, that it was a bad idea kind of thing. Then they're kind of screw you to the EU, where they've been lobbying to be able to lift the ban. The EU has a ban on developing Arctic resources. And Norway kind of said, well, you know what? Since you're not listening to us, we're going to go drill anyway. And you're free to buy it or not once we get it out. And then the third one was about their this court challenge that they want to go to the Supreme Court, that these activists are trying to say it's illegal to give any more new oil and gas leases because it violates the Paris Agreement, net zero alignment, and scope 3 emissions. So I look at that as being the first crack in the net zero facade, saying, look, it's unattainable. All of your rules would hamstring us, and you still need us. Like these contradictions just kind of have finally collapsed on themselves, and Norway's been the one to finally say these contradictions can't continue. So please check it out.
Great stuff. Yes, please check it out.
Well, thanks to everybody to all our comments here, the people who tuned in and offered their insights and questions and comments. Love it. And we'll see you all next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.